Hi, everybody. This is going to be a real treat. This is way more interesting than me just lecturing on the differences between advertising and PR. I decided that it would be more fun if I could invite someone who's really an expert in the PR field. And so today, joining me is Allison Carter. You need to check her out on LinkedIn. Allison is the editorial director at Reagan Communications and PR Daily, and my good friend, Allison. Thank you so much for doing this.
Oh, I'm thrilled to be here and chatting with your Butler students. It's great.
Awesome. So, what we really want to dive into today is the differences between advertising and PR, and
Mhm.
when you use one and when you use the other. So, since you're kind of the PR geek in the room, let's start with PR. Where does PR really shine in your marketing mix? Where does it really add the most value?
PR's purpose is really in getting someone else to say how great you are. PR, and that's a much broad, PR is a very broad term these days, right? It used to just be about, the media telling your story, right? You get written up in the paper, you get featured on TV. It's much more complex than that these days. But the bottom line still is you want someone else to tell your story in a way that makes you look good. Compared that to advertising, where really you are controlling the message, but you don't have that added layer of credibility of somebody else saying how great you are.
Absolutely. And I think, you know, 50 years ago, people would read an ad or watch an ad on television and they would innocently believe whatever messages were coming at them. And I
Bless their
think
hearts.
bless their heart. And I think today people are much more skeptical. So yes, you control the message, you decide when it appears, where it appears, how your story is told, but you have to deal with that side effect of skepticism. Now with PR, oh, go ahead. Go ahead.
Well, I was going to say one thing that's interesting though is we now have the field of influencers, right? Which is not purely PR and not purely advertising. You're usually paying an influencer, right? But you're often not paying them to read a script. In a
Mm-mm.
good influencer relationship, you are paying them to say something in their own voice that is going to resonate with their audience. And people are less skeptical of that, I feel, because they are relying on the trust that you have already built up in that person. So I think that that's an interesting case. I think you're absolutely true. People are skeptical of a television commercial or the pre-roll ad on YouTube, but I think influencers sit in a fascinating spot right between the two disciplines where you get the trust of PR while they're still being paid, and so they're not going to say anything off that's totally out of bounds.
Yeah, we did actually have an interesting conversation a few weeks ago about the pros and cons of influencers. The
Mhm.
fact that you are connecting your brand to a person
Mhm.
and that person is human, good,
Mhm.
bad, indifferent. They may say things off the cuff that have you in the corner going, "No, don't do that." And
Yeah.
so, you have to move slowly and cautiously into that arena because
Mhm.
again, you can provide information, but you can't control all the messaging.
Right.
Okay,
Yes.
so I've decided that I'm willing to let go of the control. I want the
Mhm.
credibility of a good PR campaign.
Mhm.
What makes a good PR campaign?
First of all, I think being willing to let go of that control, a lot of people think that they are willing to let go of that control, but they're not. And then, if it's a media relations campaign, then you're emailing the journalist to like change that headline or change that quote or, that kind of stuff. As long as there isn't an error, you lose that right. So you have to make sure you really are prepared to give up that control because you cannot control what an independent journalist is saying about you. So that's the first thing. Double check and make sure you're actually good with that. But beyond that, you need to first, and this is true of both advertising, PR, any kind of marketing, anything that you're talking about, you have to know who your audience is and you have to know where they hang out. And that's becoming increasingly complicated today because it used to be, long before any of your students were around, there were 3 evening TV broadcasts and a morning and an evening paper, and that's where you got your news. Now everything is incredibly niche and specialized. People watch certain YouTube channels, listen to certain podcasts, read certain websites. There's no longer really a mass market option. So you really need to break things down into very finite increments to figure out what is my audience reading, watching, and listening to. And this is a similar exercise between PR and advertising. But with PR, then you need to then say, okay, who is the right messenger for this? Who is the kind of
Mm.
journalist who would tell this story? Who is a podcaster who'd be interested in interviewing, whoever your principal is? You really need to figure out what is going to resonate with them and what is going to build that trust, because essentially PR is using the halo of trust that another institution has to make you look good. So who has the broadest halo with the audience you're trying to reach?
So figuring out who's relevant to your target customer, where are they hanging out, who are they going to listen to, who are they going to believe?
Mhm.
Because they may listen, but they may listen because they want to argue with everything that person is saying,
Of
and that's
course,
not
yeah.
going to help. That's not going to help your case. Um, as you're breaking things down and you're like, okay, I've got this niche audience, I've got this podcaster that's really popular with young men 18 to
Mhm.
25, and that's really
Yep.
my audience. And he's really strong with young men who are not into athletics and who are
Mhm.
into other things. So I've really figured it out.
Mhm.
Now, what do I do with my core message?
Mhm.
And how do I adjust that to be relevant?
You need to figure out what you have to offer them. You need to figure out what is interesting about your message to them. Advertising, it's perfectly fine to say we're the greatest, to have an
Mhm.
ad that's just we're the greatest. That doesn't fly on PR because that's boring. Your PR efforts should always boil down to what is interesting to this journalist, podcast, or whatever, to their audience. And so, usually, simply touting, we have a great product, we have a great company, we have a great whatever, is not interesting. You need to find ways of telling stories that are interesting to that audience. Some common ways that happens. Maybe you've got some really great data that you can tell a story about. You've got proprietary data that you can say, hey, we have this really fascinating stat that we would love to talk about because this impacts your audience in Y way. That's one really good way of doing it. Another is if you've got a customer who has a fascinating story, you can elevate that. An executive who has a cool story. Again, people want to do business with people. That's something
Mhm.
Lorraine taught me many years ago. And so you really want to find ways of humanizing that message. And that's where you're going to see the biggest results in PR.
Okay, so I've got my story. I
Yep.
I did this fun study where I asked people who clean and detail cars what are the
Mhm.
strangest things they have found cleaning out
Perfect.
cars, and I've got funny stories. I'm all set.
Mhm.
I found some people that I think that that would
Mhm.
see that as relevant. How do I get them to notice me? Every
Mhm.
journalist is overwhelmed. Their
Mhm.
inboxes are full. I mean, I see it as a
Mhm.
podcaster. I get
Yeah.
so many people pitching me. How do you stand out from the crowd? How do you get your pitch noticed?
It really does come down to don't make it about you, make it about the audience. The more, I get dozens and dozens of pitches the other day, the every day, and so many of them boil down to, "Would you like to talk about how awesome my company is?" And the answer to that is always no. No one cares
No.
how awesome your company is, and you're not a reliable narrator for that anyway. So you really need to figure out, how am I going to show them that we're an awesome company without ramming it down their throats? How are
Mhm.
you going to strike that balance of showing that you are trustworthy because of the cool things that you do? So, when it comes to pitching, you want to have a to the point subject line. Yeah, most journalists are going to be most comfortable with email. Some may be okay with phone. Don't call me. Please don't call me. But some some will like that. But if it's an email pitch, which are the most common, you want to keep your subject line to the point and focused on what you have. You want to keep your message tight. Some people will say, oh, it needs to be 100 words or 200 words. Like, don't tie yourself up in knots. It needs to be as many words as it needs to be. But keep in mind, you're dealing with a very busy person who is flipping through dozens of things that look identical to yours. Tell them how it's going to impact their audience. What's interesting about it? A pitch should really highlight more than anything what is interesting about what you have to say. And if you don't know what that is, if you wouldn't say, oh, that's kind of cool, you don't really have a story.
Mm. Yeah, it's so interesting when you're talking about, because I always think about the pitch kind of like the 5-minute presentation. If I have 30 minutes, I can ramble around for 30 minutes and sooner or later I'll get to the point. Tell me I have 5 minutes and I'm going to focus on exactly what I need to focus on to tell the story, hit the highlights, and leave them wanting more.
Yes.
And to me, I think that's the key to the pitch.
Yeah.
All right. So last question. I've done all of this. I followed up. You're like, yes, I want to do the story. The story comes out. That's not the end for you, is it?
No. So as a PR practitioner, then you need to find ways to amplify and use that information. That could be your social channels. That could be posting it on your website. That could be posting outtakes on your YouTube channel. That could be doing a behind the scenes piece. That could be parlaying that. Like, let's say you land let's say a trade magazine like the one that it's not trade magazine, trade website, a trade outlet like mine. Maybe then you can say, oh, hey, now I've got some credibility in the marketplace. I've made my mark. Now maybe I can go and pitch a bigger outlet and I can say, hey, other places have been interested in this. You may be interested in not the same idea, but a similar idea now that you've got the social proof. So you can parlay that into bigger and bigger stories once you get some under your belt. So yeah, that's only the beginning. If you just get a hit and stop there, you're wasting the potential. So look at what you can do to spread it on social, get more hits to it. You can then use aspects of that in your advertisement, right? Like, when a movie trailer has critic reviews, that's using PR in advertising. And so you can do the exact same thing in almost any industry.
Awesome. Allison, this was perfect. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Always a pleasure.
All right. So take a minute and tell people about Reagan Communications and PR Daily. And because I have some communication majors in my course, and I think this could be a very valuable resource for my students.
Yeah, we try to be. So PR Daily and Reagan Communications, they're the same company. They're two different websites, prdaily.com and Reagan.com, RAGAN.com. PR Daily obviously focuses on PR. It is about the art of getting press, but we use a very broad scope for that. So that means everything from social media to influencer relations, media relations, all that good stuff, as well as the basics of communications, writing, leadership, those kinds of things. Reagan.com focuses on internal communications, which is when you're basically communicating with employees inside an organization about changes in the organization or what your purpose, your mission is, those kinds of things. That might be a field that you're not as familiar with, but it can be a really great resource and skill set that uses many of the same skills as PR does, speaking, writing, those kinds of things. So go and check that out. Almost all the resources on both sites are free. So go read. We publish content every weekday. And if you have any questions, you can reach out to me at AllisonC@Reagan.com, and I'm happy to connect with you. Just say Lorraine sent you.
Awesome. Allison, thanks again. Okay, guys. So that's a quick overview of kind of how PR works. I think it's just a much more real world than some of the stuff you're going to have in the textbook. And do follow Allison, connect with her on LinkedIn, let her know you're in my class. I think you will find a lot of great information there. All right. We'll see you next time.